In tonight's Dorchester segment, we'll hear about stories concerning commercial centers as well as channeling community benefits from a cluster of new development. To bring us up to date is the managing editor and publisher of the Dorchester Reporter, Bill Forry. Thank you very much for being with us, Bill.
Thanks, Chris.
Bill, I want to talk about your lead story in this week's paper. It's about one proposed pot shop in one section of Dorchester, but what's important about this for the whole city?
So this is a proposal, Chris, that was aired out at a meeting last Monday in Codman Square at the Great Hall. It's a proposal by a company called the Grassroots Group, which includes one of the principals is Cheryl Crawford, who people may know used to run Mass Vote, is a longtime Dorchester resident, and she and her partner have put forth this proposal to open up a recreational marijuana shop in Codman Square, right across the street from the courthouse, actually, in what is now a residential building. It's 533 Washington Street, and it's in the commercial district, but it is zoned residential, so it would need a conditional use permit. So what's of interest, I think, for the whole city is just how this process works, or does it work, right? It's still really very much in the test phase, I suppose, of how the city operates with community meetings, with the ZBA, with the Cannabis Control Commission, and how we get these online, or do we? So this proposal in particular drew a crowd to the Great Hall, a mixed crowd, people who are some proponents of this and the idea of cannabis equity, having black-owned principally black-owned company that will seek out employees of color as well, and people who have also been formerly caught up in the war on drugs, or may have been incarcerated, may have had brushes with the law because of marijuana use or sale. So all of those issues are part of this proposal. This particular group wants to hire locally, wants to be in Codman Square. And they'll have to get through what is some significant community pushback from this first meeting, at least. There will be a subsequent meeting, probably in January. Cheryl Crawford and her team, which included, interestingly, former City Councilor Mike Ross, who was there at the meeting acting as the attorney for this marijuana proposal. The other person who would be familiar to some folks' ears is Daniel Linsky, who's a former Boston Police superintendent, and was essentially the number 2 person at Boston Police, who is now acting as an advisor and a consultant to private business, including some marijuana interests. He was on hand really to try to reassure folks that, look, this would be a safe operation, kind of vouching for the team. Former Councilor Ross similarly was bringing some of his experience with City Hall and zoning issues to the table. But all that being said, with all these quite credible people at the table, there's still folks who want to have the debate about whether marijuana businesses should be allowed at all in these parts of the neighborhood. There's a big split on that still, and we've seen it not just at this community meeting, but every meeting we've covered that involves marijuana. That debate is still going on.
Well, another potential nightmare for people is parking. When you have very few of these shops, you get a lot of outside traffic, but Mike Ross says it's not going to always be like that.
Well, yeah, there's going to be as many as 52 licenses granted in the city of Boston, the potential for that many or more possibly down the line. So, of course, the demand will be diffused across the city or across the region as other cities and towns come online. The big one locally right now is in Brookline, and it is quite busy. There's going to be a new shop opening up in Grove Hall. It may already be open, actually. It's scheduled to open this month, and so yeah, the demand will be diffused across the region. I think that's what he's leading to. But of course, people who live in that community understand it's already very busy with all the other businesses that are on site. Codman Square is still at the epicenter of a fight over whether to allow a Popeye's chicken restaurant to open. It's not open yet. It's been a 4-year battle over that. So all of those issues are attendant to this one too.
Sign of change in Fields Corner. 30 years ago, the closest thing to a culture of Fields Corner might have been a bar room, but we're talking about something quite different right now. The City Council's holding a hearing on that.
Yeah, there's actually a hearing that's going to be held this afternoon. At 5:30 at St. Ambrose Church, and the subject of the meeting is on a proposal to create a cultural district called Little Saigon. It'll be a Vietnamese-themed cultural district designation. This designation is awarded by the state, and it comes with some funding to help promote it and to kind of make it a destination beyond Dorchester, beyond really the Commonwealth, to let folks who are visiting Massachusetts understand this is a place to go to experience Vietnamese culture. The proponents of this are from the Vietnamese community, a coalition of Vietnamese-led community groups. They've been seeking support from the political leadership of the city. Mayor Walsh has indicated support for this. Councilor Frank Baker, who's going to chair this evening's meeting, is also on the record being supportive of it. So it does have momentum, and it looks like it will happen. There has been some pushback at local civic meetings in the past from folks who say, well, wait a minute, why do we want to just make it one cultural designation over another? Vietnamese community is clearly a big part of Fields Corner, but there are other groups that are equally very much part of the fabric. And I think some folks felt a little uncomfortable, but as you understand a little bit more about what a cultural district is and what it means, and it's not intended to be exclusive in any way. I think if people are more interested in this, they should probably go to this meeting this evening if they can, 5:30 at St. Ambrose Church on Adams Street.
And thinking of districts in Dudley Square and Hyde Square and Jamaica Plain that are also culturally inflected, they can be a magnet to help the businesses, can't they?
I think so. That's the intent, and it still has a little bit of a stigma attached to it, I guess, from folks who say, well, wait a minute, why do we want to sort of balkanize the neighborhoods and create tags, ethnic tags on them? That's kind of an old school frame. And yet this is really coming from a new generation of people who are saying, well, we want to celebrate some of the cultural hubs that are really, they do exist. And the Vietnamese community clearly is such a big part of that stretch of Dorchester Ave.
Well, if you go to another part of Dorchester around JFK UMass Station near the Columbia Point Peninsula, you have another kind of hub, all this new development that's happening, and people at the Columbia-Savin Hill Civic Association, they're trying to make the best of that. So what are they doing exactly? Right.
So Columbia-Savin Hill has created a subcommittee, which is called the Community Benefits Subcommittee, and their intent, and they've been meeting for a few months quietly and in smaller groups to say, well, what do we want to do here? The intent is to get the state and the city and the private business interests that are all kind of circling Columbia Point and Savin Hill right now to come into the same room and come to some consensus on how funding that's set aside by these individual development projects could be leveraged for bigger uses. Things like fixing Kosciuszko Circle, JFK UMass Station, getting state attention, state funding to help take advantage of this opportunity, because I think that's the way that the civic group is looking at it. Yes, there is a little sliver of NIMBYism perhaps among part of the group that's saying, well, we don't want this project or we don't want that. But generally, the group understands these projects are coming online. 10,000 units of housing potentially over the next several years between Bayside and the former WLVI Channel 56 building, which is, there are proposals for several hundred units of housing right there, towers. All of these things are kind of coming at once. The civic group hopes to kind of get some consensus, be proactive here, and they sent a letter out to the political delegation from Dorchester last week asking them to meet with the civic group and come to create a framework essentially for what they want to ask for.
And now that Morrissey Boulevard was once again recently flooded during the holiday period,
what else is new,
Dorchester
right?
Bay is rising, and people are concerned about climate control. So you've got something coming up on that too?
Yes, next Wednesday evening in Fields Corner at the Vietnamese American Viet Aid Center, there will be a second community meeting convened by the City of Boston on what they call their Climate Ready Dorchester project. Now, this is something that's been happening across the city in different sections. Dorchester's Climate Ready planning began in September with a community meeting at the Leahy Holleran Center in Neponset. This is the follow-up to that. And what they're trying to do, the city officials are convening this meeting. They're asking residents to come and give them some sense of what kind of development and what kind of planning do people want to see along the coast. And places like Port Norfolk, Neponset, obviously Columbia-Savin Hill, all along the coast there's already impacts, right? You mentioned Morrissey Boulevard and the flooding that is routine there now. That's just one corridor. All of these neighborhoods are impacted. There could be, there are development proposals right on the water in Port Norfolk, for instance, which have been stalled really because of concern about resiliency issues. So this is intended to help people navigate that and come to some understanding of what is possible.
And I know there are some other stories and other details to go with the ones we've mentioned, so if people want to find that, how should they?
Well, the best bet is probably go online to .news.com. That's where all of our stories are accessible.
Thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Bill Forry from the Dorchester Reporter.